All right, so let's talk about this one. I assume this is a graduating senior
Yes.
portrait that you did outdoors. Obviously, very shallow depth of field here. Beautiful foreground, middle ground, background, making everything look really interesting. But where does our eye go? Even with the colors and with the lighting and so forth around her, the focus is very nicely in the center of that image, right on her face, where it absolutely has to be. I want to ask you first and foremost, how much of that was captured in camera, and how much of that was done? I mean, I noticed you got a bit of vignetting there, but how much of that balance was done in camera versus in post?
That's 100% in camera. That's a 300 millimeter fixed focal length lens, Nikon lens, that's done on my Nikon, or one of my Nikons. And you pre-visualize this stuff. And this is a place near this client's home. I had done family portraits of the year before, and she booked then and said, "Hey, my daughter's going to be a senior." Now, this daughter's very smart, very articulate, not a real chatty or a laugh it up type of person. We did get a few smiling expressions, but she's very introverted, and her mother during the consultation had talked about this, and she said she kind of reminds me of Mona Lisa, modern day Mona Lisa. And I thought, well, that's the pose I'm going to do a couple in, like Mona Lisa's, looking right at the camera, and this is on their wall. And so I literally found a field near their home where kids ran out and played. It was part of their property, and all these beautiful flowers, and a lot of them are just weeds, but you can make them look good, And so I found some spots, because really for depth in photography, we're looking foreground, middle ground, which is our subject, and a background. And if you could throw that throw the foreground and the background out of focus softly and pleasantly, the eye has to go to that subject. So this was on a tripod, 300 millimeter lens, focused on her face, and I had a very small, can't remember which light it was, but there was some fill light off-camera flash there. But it was one of those days when it was beautifully overcast, so you could work almost anywhere. So I was like, thank you, lighting gods, because they had great property, but if it was sunny out, it would have been a little tougher. Todd, real quickly, and then we'll move on. One of the things we're going to talk about, I bet, is on Chuck's paper, and we never talked about this, is composition. Okay, the eyes are a third of the way down, even in a horizontal portrait. She's not centered. She's at what we call either the crash point or the compositional point, where she's close to being on center, but she's still a little off for balance. There's almost, I can't point to my screen, it's almost like a little triangle between her shoulder, the top of her head, and those flowers. All these compositional things that come in there that sometimes people do it by accident. I don't know why that looks good to me, but it's better. But if she was dead centered, it wouldn't be as fun. And so, keep your eye on the composition. It makes it more interesting. But those eyes, a third of the way down, whether it's a vertical, it's usually, not always, but usually is the way I go.
Beautifully done. And Nathan says she looks into the image rather than being centered.
Yeah.
Right on, Nathan. Looks great.
Yep. Very good.
Thank you, Tom.
Next image. All right. Oh, here, let's take a look at this one. So this is obviously a wedding image with some very creative work done to it. So, yeah, talk about this one, Tom.
Yeah, this was a wedding that I booked last year, actually 2 years ago. He's in the military, and they had to wait, a young man and a young lady. I had done both their baby portraits and families, separate families. Then they met, so I knew all the families. Well, they booked the wedding 2 years ago for May of this year, May 23rd, which is kind of an iffy time in Maine. But then COVID hit, and they couldn't have 300 people at a church. So they had 40 family members at a private camp that one of them owned. And so I have a second photographer that assists me once in a while. He and I did this wedding with masks, but they didn't wear masks, but we just kind of explained how we'd work, and we stayed away. It was good news, bad news. It showed up, and it was absolutely stunningly gorgeous, a beautiful lake. It was gorgeous. The only thing is the wedding was at 1 o'clock, and there was not a cloud in the sky, and they wanted it to be outside right in front of this thing. And I'm like, I've got powerful lights, but you got to have some real lightning to fill flash that. This handheld flash is just going to be dead in about 10 minutes. You take what you got and you work with it. Now, when we did our groups, we were able to move to a place I suggested, which still showed water, but was open shade. Beautiful. Everything worked. The fill flash worked great. But they really wanted stuff out here. And so I did do some post work on this painting-wise, because they ended up with a 1624 canvas of this, and it was part of their wedding package and a few other things. But so they walked out there, and I did have to take this little things that stick up on the side, you know, that keep it in the water. I had to retouch those out. But I photographed right into the sun. I did use a bit of film flash there. I hope the horizontal, you know, it bugs me if the horizontal's off. I think it looks okay. Maybe it's just my head. But so the sun is right above their heads. You can see it's backlighting them. And my poor second shoot, he's a great photographer, but he's like, you're a wizard because I'm getting nothing but a silhouette. I said, I'll fix that. So it took a little magic, but they loved this, and I was able to fix it. And as a matter of fact, a couple of these, there were boats going by watching, and I had to take the boats out of the background, although a couple of them I left because the people were waving. It was their neighbors. It was pretty cute. So lighting-wise, this is taken at a high shutter, you know, like was like a f8 at 1,500 of a second or whatever. It doesn't really matter at this point, other than I wasn't worried about depth of field. I was really worried about the lighting and the exposure. So I exposed for the highlights, meaning I wanted the sky and the white of the gown and things to show up, and then I used the film flash on their backs to at least give us some detail in the white and in the black. And then we've talked about this before, Snap Art 3, which is by Alien Skin. It's a painterly look, because they really wanted this painted look. And so by the time you put that on canvas, it looks like a painting. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
Hard to see here.
So talk to us very quickly about the amount of time, okay? Because weddings, you know how weddings are. They're time sensitive. How much time from beginning to end would you guess it took you to create this image live, not post-production?
Well, you know, it's like triage. If you've done enough weddings, and Chuck, you did the same thing, you do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of weddings. I mean, I came home that day, and I actually had leg cramps because I was dehydrated. I'm like, I'm getting old because we ran the whole day. But because they knew us and trusted us, they allowed us to build the time in so we didn't have to go crazy. The other advantage is it was the ceremony and the reception were right there. That actually was an advantage. So once the ceremony got over and they said, everybody go in, have a bite to eat, we're going to be a little while. So we did all the groups. I like to work it down so that I have them alone eventually. So this was actually, we tried to always meet the bride and groom before the wedding. They were in two separate locations, couldn't end up doing that, so we had to do bride and groom portraits as well afterwards, but it was a small enough party. So I'm going to say the formals probably took 45 or 50 minutes, and so it was probably an hour from the time they said, I do, down the aisle they go, so to speak. People go back in, listen to music, drinking, appetizers, all of which I recommend to keep everybody happy so that it's not like the movies where the butler did it. In this case, the photographer did it. They can see you being photographed, but I'm going to ask that nobody else is there. So it was under an hour to do everything. And that one took a few minutes. I had to play with the lighting, but I was prepared. I knew it was going to be like that, so I was ready for it.
Excellent. Thank you.